Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah waliy as-salihin. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Khatam al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala abdika wa rasulika Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man da'a bi da'watihi wa istanna bi sunnati ila yawmiddin wa sallam tasliman kathira. أما بعد فأوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل والسمع والطاعة ويقول الحق سبحانه إن الله مع الذين اتقوا والذين هم محسنون. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and surely Allah is the friend and protector of the righteous. And I bear witness that Allah is one and has no partners, and that Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, is his servant, his last messenger. May Allah always, constantly send peace and blessings to Muhammad, to his family, to his companions, to all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, I begin by reflecting on the essence of our protection in this world, the essence of our life, and that is taqwa. That is the consciousness of Allah. And that we surround ourselves with this consciousness, that we never forget Allah Azza wa Jal at any point in our life, whether it be good times or whether it be difficult times. And Allah has told us in many places in the Quran of the importance of taqwa and combined it with other qualities. In this particular verse in Surah Al-Nahl, verse 128, Allah tells us that verily Allah is with those who have taqwa, who have His consciousness, and those who do righteousness. Inna Allaha ma'al ladhina taqaw wal ladhina hum muhsinun. And so taqwa with ihsan, that the taqwa is the consciousness, it is the understanding, it is the quality, and it interprets itself in the life of the believer, in actions of righteousness, in everything that we do. And Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was the best example of this ihsan under the consciousness of Allah. And his companions, who were taken from ordinary people living in Mecca at that time, his companions were shaped in a 13-year period in Mecca. Their character was shaped. Their understanding was developed. And it came through 13 years of struggle, strife, and suffering. In many cases, they were cut off from their families. Some were exiled from their home. Some were tortured in terrible ways. Others were killed. But their character was molded as the metal that is cleaned and molded in the fire. Their character was developed. And that Meccan period was a basis for what would come forward in the Medina period. And it was the Medina period, the last 10 years, where the rules of Islam were revealed in details, where the laws of Islam were enacted. But these rules and laws, without the consciousness of Allah, are meaningless. Because it is the taqwa, it is the character of the believer, which is the most important aspect. And during that 13-year period, as the believers were suffering immensely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealing the Quran to them. And this Quran to them was a beautiful gift. It was guidance that came in the time of the greatest difficulty. And from amongst these Meccan chapters, there were the chapters of Hamim. And the Prophet ﷺ, in speaking about the 7 Hamim surahs, has told us Al-Hawamim Dibaj al-Quran. That these Hamim chapters that begin with the 2 letters Ha and Mim, they are the silken brocade of the Quran itself. Like a beautifully woven piece of cloth that you would put on yourself in the best of occasions. Surah Ghafir and Fussilat, Surah Ash-Shura, Surah Al-Zukhruf, Ad-Dukhan, Surah Al-Jathiyah, Surah Al-Ahqaf, Dibaj al-Quran. And in these chapters is guidance for people who are under tremendous pressure. Muslim world today, we find ourselves under tremendous pressure. And it is coming to us not in one part of the world, it is coming all over the world now. Just recently, a few days ago, in the West African country of Mali, in the Ogosago village, in the Mopti region, along the Niger River, in a village of the Fulbe Fulani people, who were the carriers of the Quran, those who instituted Islam on a high level in West Africa and even came across to America, some in chains, and instituted Islam here in America. In one of their villages, and this is only a few days ago, a group of pagan Dogon worshippers came to their village and killed 134 people and wounded 55. And that included pregnant women, elderly, children. They were killed only because they say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is intimidation, Islamophobic intimidation, which is happening throughout the world. And it is something that we collectively as believers have to recognize. Not the importance of it when it comes in any particular part of the world, but anywhere in the world where a Muslim is suffering, then we are all suffering. Anywhere in the world where Muslims are tortured, we are all under this severe pressure. Our response comes from the Quran itself. In the beautiful Hamim chapters, in Surah Al-Fussilat, verse 30, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ أَنْ لَا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ. Allah said to the believers who are being tortured and suffering, as for those who say, our Lord is Allah, and then they continue on the right way, they continue on the straight path, the angels descend upon them, saying to them, fear not, nor be sad, and receive the glad news of paradise that you have been promised. And so 3 beautiful gems come out of this one verse. And these are concerning 3 characteristics. The first, when Allah tells us, La takhafu, do not be afraid. Do not be described as one who has fear in his heart. Wala tahzanu, and do not be described as one who has huzn, who is depressed and who is sad. Wa abshiru, but take glad tidings, because paradise has been promised to us. And so the maqam of fear, the condition or the zone of being afraid of things, this is a zone that is used by the shaitan, wa'iyadu billah, and the forces of evil And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many cases, even with Prophet Musa alayhi salam, was telling him, La takhaf, do not be afraid of the Fir'aun. Even though Pharaoh was the most powerful man on the earth at the time, Allah told him, do not be afraid. Because fear itself has to do with the unknown, that we are afraid of what might happen in the future, that we don't have knowledge of what will happen in the future. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Alim, has knowledge of all things. And so when we depend upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when we have husn al-dhan billah, when we believe and have the best opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that Allah has knowledge over all things. And so we depend upon Him. And that is the hal, or the state of tawakkul. It is the state of dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second key point coming out of this Hamim chapter, after the maqam, or the zone of fear, is the zone of sadness, huzn or hazan. This word huzn or hazan does not come in the Quran by itself, except it is being prohibited. It never comes alone by itself in a positive way. Allah tells us in Surah Al Imran verse 139, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Do not fall weak, do not be in sadness. Allah tells us in the same chapter verse 170, فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. That those who are the friends of Allah have no fear, and they should not be in a state of depression or sadness. Shaykh Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, sadness weakens the heart and diminishes determination and wanting to go forward. There is nothing more beloved to the shaitan than the sadness of a believer. Ibn al-Qayyim also said, don't ruin your happiness with worry. Don't ruin your mind with pessimism, negativity. As-Sa'di said, life is short, so don't shorten it with worries, grief, and sadness. And so we look at the third quality, the maqam of bushra, the condition of glad tidings, the dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we remember our brothers and sisters in New Zealand, as we remember Muslims all over the world who don't necessarily have names. We remember the heroism, and not just have the sadness for those who have passed. They have been promised paradise. But we should remember heroism, shuja'ah, courage, and the ability to stand, depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sister Husni Ara Parveen of Bangladesh, 42 years old. She died in New Zealand in Christchurch in the masjid in a hail of bullets. She was trying to shield her husband, who was in a wheelchair. She was trying to shield her nephew, rahimahullah. Naeem Rashid of Pakistan, he tried to tackle the killer, and he saved many lives. And then he was killed and went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Haj Dawood Nabi of Afghanistan, 71 years old. He was the first person to be killed. He greeted the killer at the door and said, "Hello, brother." And then he was killed. Mu'ad Ibrahim of Somalia, 3 years old. A playful young man. He played and used to smile a lot, and he would look at the imam and say, "I want to be like the imam." He died in a hail of bullets, rahimahullah. We remember the maqam, the position of dependence on Allah. And it was shown to us beautifully by our brother Abdulaziz of Afghanistan. Abdulaziz, he depended upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he went forward. And he describes the horrific scene that when he heard the bullets coming, when he heard people falling, he did not run away, he ran toward the action. And when he ran toward the action and he saw a person dressed in a military uniform shooting and swearing, he did not run, and he describes, there was no fear in my body. Fear left me. This is the maqam of tawakkul. He was in this state. He looked around and he took the closest thing to him, which was a credit card machine, and he ran toward the shooter. He threw it at him. This is a man with an automatic weapon, but our Muslim brother in the maqam of tawakkul threw the credit card machine at him. The killer ran. Abdulaziz followed him. Abdulaziz said, come to me, and pulled him away from the masjid. And when he realized that a person who had been killed, a shotgun was next to him, then Abdulaziz, Jazahullah khair, took the empty shotgun, confronted the killer, threw it at him, and the killer who had run away, it smashed his car window, and the killer ran away in fear. And as the Imam said, a person came into our masjid, started taking lives, and Abdulaziz stood up, drove him away. He saved most of the lives of the people who lived. This is the maqam of tawakkul ala Allah. And in the Hamim Surah, Fussilat, in the next ayah, Allah tells us, نَحْنُ أَوْلِيَاؤُكُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدَّعُونَ نُزُلًا مِّنْ غَفُورٍ رَحِيمٍ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِّمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to remember, we are your guardians in this world's life and in the hereafter, and you shall have therein what your souls desire, and you shall have therein what you ask for. A provision from the oft forgiving, most merciful. And who is better in speech than one who calls to Allah while doing good deeds and says, surely I am from the Muslims. I am from those who submit. And so in this maqam of tawakkul ala Allah, we recognize that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decide when we live and when we pass through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having knowledge over all things, has promised to those who have iman, thumma istaqamu, they do what is right, they try to be good. Allah has promised paradise and has given us that feeling in this maqam of tawakkul ala Allah. And then Allah continues and reminds us, who is better in speech than one who calls to Allah? He stands up for Islam, calling to righteousness, and he does good deeds. So it's not just words, it is actions that follow. And so it is this example which is coming to Muslims all over the world. The courage of a simple brother in a masjid coming all the way to this part of the world, recognizing that we can also be of the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To have that tawakkul, to depend upon Allah, to try best to take fear out of our lives, to try best that not to be sad. Yes, we mourn those who passed, but abshiru, they are given promise of paradise. And so that feeling is settling over many parts of the Muslim world, even though we are in strife. It is that feeling, insha'Allah, that will rise us up out of the ashes, that we will stand in the face of Islamophobia and hate. But it needs for us to depend upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to recognize our brothers and sisters on the ground. Even the simple act of coming into the masjid and parking your car properly, of taking time when you enter the masjid, taking time leaving. Look at your brother and sister. If one is physically challenged, help him or her out of the masjid. Have the courage like our sister Husni, who protected her family member in the wheelchair. Remember those who have fallen. Comfort those who have lost their family amongst us. We ask Allah to bless the family of brother Muhammad Amin. We ask Allah to bless his family, to give them strength, and to give them that feeling of tawakkul and bushra, that inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to our brother, as those who have fallen around the world, a place in paradise. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give our brother Muhammad Amin, to all of those who fell in New Zealand and in Mali, West Africa, those in Philistine, those who are suffering right now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease their burden in this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease the wounds on their bodies. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give those who have fallen the highest part of Jannah. And may Allah put calmness in our hearts. May Allah put tawakkul, dependence in our hearts. And may Allah give us the strength to stand up with courage when the test comes to us. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب استغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.